Algamir World, the time we met. Arc 1, the beginning. Chapter 1, S. All is grown as he once again tried to sit up, but to no avail. He gently propped his foot, only to hiss as the pain came back. It was clear his ankle was twisted. He looked up at the slope from where he had fallen from. There was no possibility of him climbing back up with this injured foot. He looked up at the sky, peeking out of the dense trees, and realized it was getting dark. Great, he mutters to himself. So I'm trapped in the forest with a twisted ankle, with no way of getting out, and it's almost night time. He once again tried tapping his phone, which had cracked during the fall and was greeted by the blank screen. He groaned in frustration and set it back down. Testing his leg once more to see how severe the injury was, he realized his ankle was swelling. Not a good sign. He tried yelling out once or twice, wondering someone might be nearby, though he himself knew it was hopeless. No one came into the forest without a good reason to, especially when nearly night time. Well, no one minus him apparently. He wondered what would happen next. Would his mother come home and immediately realize he was missing? Or had his grandfather already figured it was getting late and the Ace was still not home? Would they call the police? Or would they think he was at a friend's place? What if they found out too late? What if his mother thought he was in his room and his grandfather hadn't heard him leaving? Or if he had to spend the night here in the forest? Would he even get out? Ace's mind was a mixture of all these thoughts, and he felt himself panicking. He attempted to calm himself down, but it was easier said than done. He knew spiraling now was the worst thing he could do, but he couldn't help it. His mind was on autopilot. Then he mentally stabbed himself. Get a hold of yourself. Even if no one's going to come, you can still try to find something to help yourself. Despite the swelling, he tried to get up once more, only to fall on the first step. His balance was too off. Okay, so no walking. He checked his surroundings. It was getting darker. He needed to find a shelter. He reached the area and saw a small rock opening. Considering about the risk for a moment, but seeing as staying outside wouldn't help as well, with a little bit of struggling, he managed to get to that point. The townspeople didn't think there were any wild animals in the forest, but just to be safe, he squinted in at it closely, and once he was sure there wasn't any immediate threats, he entered the cave. After a while, his body started to feel heavy. The adrenaline from earlier had drained away and it made him weaker. The crawling had not helped too, and his body ached and his ankle throbbed, but he knew falling asleep was too risky. He placed his head against the wall of the rock and decided to rest for a bit before thinking of his next course of action. Automatically, his mind went back to how he had ended up in this situation. Elsa reluctantly gotten up to the sounds of the birds merrily chirping and the sunlight streaming through the window next to his bed. At first, he had simply turned the other side and tried to fall back asleep. However, realizing that that would not be happening, he had gotten up with a grunt and he made his way to the washroom, brushed his teeth, freshened up, and attempted to tame his bedhead with a comb. Attempt being the keyword. Finally giving up, he opted to simply gel it down, hoping it would stay like that at least temporarily. He quickly put on his school uniform and tossed a few books that he could find into his bag, got his gray scarf, and rolled it around his neck. He never left anywhere without it. It was sort of like a lucky item, or more of a memento for him, although it got a few weird stares at it during the summer. He then went downstairs to find an empty house as expected. His mother was probably already at work. Ace had gotten used to that, and he wasn't going to blame her. Being a single mother was hard on her, especially when it came to managing the family needs. His grandfather was usually never around in the morning and likely with some of the other senior citizens, jogging or playing tennis. Asad used to believe the older generation were people who sat around all day sleeping. His perspective was immediately shattered once his grandfather had started to live with them. After eating some leftover food, which was some moldy mac and cheese from yesterday's dinner, he tossed it into his bag. Only then had he decided to look at the wall clock and cursed, realizing he was late. He immediately rushed out of the house, making sure to lock it. Thankfully, he lived a walking distance from the school, so if he ran with all his morning strength, he could probably get there 3 minutes before the starting time. He ran as fast as his semi athletic legs could take him. But of course, his life could never get easier because at that very moment he bumps into a girl wearing a different uniform, sending her crashing into the ground. Scrambling to get himself together, he goes to help the girl, only to be ignored. The girl picked up everything she had dropped and proceeded to walk away without saying a word, clutching her bag tightly. He grimaced. Great. It's only 8:30 in the morning and I already managed to get on a person's bad side. Realizing what he had just said, the school started so soon and he was getting even more late, as immediately ran up to the school gates in view. Thankfully, even with that mishap, Fair still seemed to have a little bit of kindness to him and he managed to make it on time. Opening the door to his classroom and finding the usual clutter and chatter of the rest of the students, he made his way to his desk at the corner of the room. He had just set his bag down when he felt his breath knocked out for the second time since that morning. Ugh, why me? He turned around to see who had the brilliant idea to slap someone that hard on their back, and as expected, found his self proclaimed best friend Ryan grinning up at him. Looks like you're still not living up to your name, Ace. A second more and you would have been late. Ryan then sat at a desk adjoining Ace's. Well, it's not a surprising thing for you, he said with a chuckle. You're the only guy who lives so close to his school and can still get late. Ace grumbled, saying, I was up late. I had some extra assignments to do. It was half the truth. He had been trying to do his homework at night, but that was because he had spent most of his evening lazing around when his mind screamed at him to work. Ryan smirked. Right, it's not like we share the same classes and the same homework. As in response had thrown his notebook in front of Ryan's face, receiving a voice from him, and had half-heartedly told the guy to mind his own business. I get a bit late and you make this much ruckus. For your information, I would have come earlier if it weren't for me accidentally bumping into this person. Ryan was interested. Was it a girl? Yes. Ace wondered where his meddlesome friend was going with this conversation. Was she pretty? I guess. Ace couldn't really remember much about her, except for her light brown hair. He couldn't get a good look of anything else. Ryan breaks his line of thought asking, did you fall in love like in one of those romance movies? Ace's answer to that was to give Ryan another slap with his book. The banter paused when the teacher came in and classes began. During break, Ace and Ryan had made their way to their usual spot. The area was mostly quiet and, according to Ryan, perfect for spying on people down below. It had a balcony that allowed a clear view to the ground as well as the forest a bit of a distance away. You could easily see the heads of the trees from that point, and if you squint, a few paths down the sides as well. Ace had taken out his heated leftover mac and cheese, while Ryan, as always, had taken out his morning made meal by his grandmother. Sandwiches with different types of filling, some homemade potato chips, some chopped fruits, a cookie, and some fruit juice. Ace found himself looking longingly at the food. Brian had saved some of his chips, but that was all. Ace knew better than to want more than his mother could make as of now, but that didn't stop him from wanting it. As himself and his grandfather couldn't cook to save their lives, so all the kitchen duties were up to his mother, and he was not being dramatic. His grandfather had in fact almost burned down the stove with a pan once. His mother had not been happy with the outcome and had banned his grandfather from the kitchen. Since then, he had opted to just fixing machines or going around the town in both. He took a bite of his food. It's fine, he thought, though I should probably tell Mom to lay down on the salt. Or is that a mole? Me too. He suddenly had this weird feeling of a tingle down his spine, as if someone was watching them. He turned around, and for a second, just for a second, he really felt as if he saw something there, but it looked blurry, like a shadow. Did I just see someone? He mentally smacked himself. Idiot. This is a school. Of course, there could be someone behind there. But the feeling was still there, and deciding he didn't want to stick for too long, he urged Ryan to quickly finish his meal, which just got him a confused look. Once they were done, the two boys were walking back to class when Ace bumped into a boy. Really no? He was bumping into way too many people today. He tried to give the guy a hand up but was once again ignored by the bumped person. Am I that invisible? He thought. Other people just hate being bumped into. Ryan patted him on the shoulder and, as if reading his mind, said, Don't worry about him. He's probably just tried to talk to one of his seniors. And how do you know he's in a grade lower than us? Ryan had said, Well, I've never seen him in our classes, and I highly doubt our seniors would just walk away. That statement held too much truth. Realizing there was no use in thinking too much of it, the two made their way back to class, and the rest of the day went on, and Ace forgot about the weird feeling he had during break due to a new rumor. Apparently, some students who had gone out during the break had learned that the river running in the middle of the town had suddenly gone completely dry, and no one knew why. There was a first. The river never dried up. Even during the biggest heat waves, the river had always flown. People nearby had tried to find out the reason, but unfortunately no one could. It was a blow for the town. The main source of water was the river, and while people stored some of this water themselves, it would obviously not last long if the river remained dry. Once classes ended, Ace and Ryan walked until the junction, where they had bid each other goodbye. It was a quiet walk. There weren't any vehicles on the road, and the wind too blew in a gentle breeze. Just then, Ed suddenly heard a rustling from a tree and looked up to see a few leaves falling and a small movement among the branches. He didn't see anything, but the unease he had during lunch came back. He didn't know why he felt like this, but deciding to listen to his instincts this time, he started to walk a bit faster. He hurried home to find his grandfather with some headphones on and, from the looks of it, trying to practice a dance routine. S decides to ignore that situation and goes to his room. He had quickly sat down at his desk, hoping to finish his homework soon in hopes of at least getting some sleep that day, but found it difficult to decide on what to do first and how to do it. However, just as he started on one assignment, from his open window flew in a small white butterfly, just like all other ordinary butterflies in backyards. But then, suddenly, the butterfly had started to glow. It gave out a dim light, similar to that of a firefly. But unlike a firefly, the glow it gave out was white. It bathed the room with a glow that made it mesmerizing to look at. The butterfly fluttered in his peripheral for a minute or two, floating from one side to another, as if calling him, before flying out of the window. Edge immediately and unconsciously stood up and ran downstairs with a yell. Grandpa, I'm going out for a while. I'll be back soon. He doubted his grandfather heard him though, but being focused on the butterfly, he reached the front door and looked around, hoping it hadn't flown away. There was something about the flying creature that made him drawn to it. It fluttered over to his face before once again flying away as if beckoning him to follow. and follow he did. Ace followed the little glowing insect for a good while until he was pretty sure he was a bit farther away from home than he wanted to be. But the butterfly was still there, and every time he stopped to look back, it stopped too, as if waiting for him. So he just couldn't stop now, and despite his better judgment, he followed. He followed the little guy until he finally reached the edge of the forest, a dense layer of trees that seemed to join with each other at the branches, covering the entire place in shadows. The butterfly went in, and Ace took a hesitant step back. The forest wasn't very known for being haunted or dangerous, but still he wondered if he should go in at a time like this. He looked at the sky. The sun was setting, but it was still not dark yet. He felt his phone in his pocket. I'll quickly look in and come out in a few seconds, he thought and entered. The butterfly flew onto his face, landing right on his nose for a moment, before once again flying deeper into the forest. Ace followed for a while. The area was getting denser by the second, and Ace had been rethinking his decision of following the butterfly. But then he tripped, and instead of falling face down onto the ground, he kept falling. He had been on a slope. After a bit of tumbling, his body finally landed on solid ground. And that was how he ended up in his present predicament. Ace sighed. The butterfly had long since disappeared and was nowhere to be found, and now he was covered in mud and dirt and whatever else littered the forest, and he was certain he was lost too. He once again tried getting up, but that just increased the pain he was feeling, and he couldn't stop himself from giving a small rip. The surrounding had also become colder now. This was not his day. He once again tried yelling out, but there was no reply. He groaned. I was just thinking about starting a fire when suddenly he hears the sound of twigs and crunching from a nearby bush, and the sound of something or someone coming nearer. What? And the beam of a flashlight landed on his face, making him blink. To be continued. Algamir world, that time we met.